In this video, we will explore why the voice that says, "You're not enough," has persisted for so long and what to do about it. You'll learn how to meet your shadow, not with fear, but with curiosity. You'll discover 3 powerful tools for healing that don't require you to change who you are, but to reclaim who you were told not to be. If you've ever felt like you're not enough, stay with me, because by the end, you may come to see that the shadow wasn't your enemy. It was the doorway back to yourself. What if the voice that says you're not enough is not evidence of your brokenness, but the echo of something much older, much deeper, and far more human? In the psychological framework of Carl Jung, the experience of inadequacy is rarely what it seems on the surface. It is not merely a product of low self-esteem, nor can it be dismissed as simple insecurity. Rather, it is a psychic symptom, a symbol pointing toward a deeper schism within the self. And like all symptoms, it arises not to torment, but to guide. It is a flare from the unconscious, signaling that something vital has been lost, buried, or rejected. It is not a problem to be eliminated, but a message to be decoded. Jung taught that the human psyche contains more than the ego, the conscious identity we present to the world. Beneath this facade lies a vast and complex territory, the personal unconscious, and deeper still, the collective unconscious. Within the personal unconscious resides what Jung called the shadow, a term not meant to evoke fear, but depth. The shadow is not evil. It is simply unknown. It is made of the aspects of ourselves that were disapproved of, shamed, or silenced in early life. These aspects are not erased. They are merely disowned. You were not born believing you were inadequate. That belief was learned. It may have emerged from subtle cues in your environment, comments like, "Don't be so emotional, you're too sensitive," or "Why can't you be more like them?" At first, these remarks may seem trivial. But to the developing psyche, especially the child that craves belonging, they are seismic. They signal danger. If I express this part of myself, I will not be loved. And so to survive, we cut away parts of our personality, our boldness, our anger, our vulnerability, our wildness, and bury them in the unconscious. But what is buried is not gone. Instead, it festers. It becomes the origin point of the inner critic, the voice that now says, "You are not enough." But that voice is not a monster. It is a mask. And behind the mask is a younger self, a wounded part of your psyche still seeking safety in self-rejection. Jung emphasized that this split in the psyche is not pathological, it is natural. All of us create a persona, a socially acceptable identity that gains us approval. But the problem arises when we believe that the persona is all that we are. When we deny the shadow, it gains autonomy. It becomes a puppeteer pulling the strings of our lives from behind the curtain. It manifests in patterns, perfectionism, burnout, self-sabotage, emotional numbness. It speaks not in words, but in compulsions. In the unshakable feeling that no matter what you do, it's never enough. And yet, as Jung so often reminded us, the gold is in the dark. What you feel as inadequacy may in truth be the soul's call for reintegration. The feeling is painful, but beneath the pain lies potential. Your shadow holds your repressed emotions, yes, but it also guards your vitality, your authenticity, your creativity. In rejecting it, you did not become less, you became incomplete. And the psychic ache you feel is not a punishment. It is a longing, a yearning for wholeness. So how do we respond to this ache? We begin not by trying to silence the voice of inadequacy, but by listening to it. What does it want you to know? What part of you is still hiding, still afraid, still waiting to be seen? The process, Jung called individuation becoming whole, is not about fixing yourself. It is about remembering yourself, recovering the lost fragments of the psyche and welcoming them back into consciousness. It is not a linear journey, and it cannot be completed in a single weekend workshop or journal entry. It is sacred work, slow work. But it is the only path that leads to true freedom. Because the opposite of inadequacy is not confidence, it is integration. The moment you begin to face your shadow, not with judgment, but with compassion, you reclaim your power. The voice that once told you you weren't good enough softens not because you silenced it, but because it no longer needs to scream. It has been heard. It has been honored. And in that space of inner witnessing, you come to see you were never broken. You were simply waiting to become whole. So before we continue, take a breath. Feel into your body. Recall a time you felt not enough. Instead of pushing it away, pause. Ask, what part of me did I abandon to feel accepted? That question is not the end, it is the beginning of the most profound return you will ever make. The return to yourself. If you were to sit quietly and truly listen to the voice that whispers, "You're not enough," what do you think it would say back? Not with rage, not with condemnation, but with trembling honesty. Carl Jung reminds us that what we perceive as flaws in our character are often misunderstood expressions of deeper psychological processes. The inner voice of inadequacy, for example, is not the voice of failure, it is the voice of the shadow. And contrary to popular belief, the shadow is not a saboteur or enemy. It is a protector, a primitive guardian of the self. It does not judge or reason the way the conscious mind does. It simply remembers. And it holds pain in the only way it knows how, by keeping it hidden. This is one of the great paradoxes of shadow work. The very part of us that causes us to feel unworthy is also the part that once tried to keep us safe. When we were young, when the nervous system was still forming and our identity fragile, certain emotions or expressions became dangerous. A parent might have shut us down when we cried. A teacher may have humiliated us for asking questions. A friend may have walked away the moment we expressed too much joy, too much sadness, too much truth. And so the unconscious formed a pact. Never go there again. Instead of risking rejection, we learned to conform. Instead of expressing our rawness, we wore a mask. But the price of safety was authenticity, and the cost of acceptance was the exile of self. This is how the shadow was born, not as a punishment, but as a protective mechanism, and it did its job well. You learned to read a room before speaking. You kept your needs small. You polished your achievements to earn affection. But what was once survival has now become a prison. The shadow left unchecked continues to whisper that the only way to be loved is to stay hidden. That wholeness is dangerous. That visibility is a threat. But here is where Jung offers us a turning point. He teaches that the goal of the psyche is not perfection, it is integration. What you once suppressed to survive, you must now recover to thrive. And this is not a betrayal of your younger self, it is an honoring of them. Because that part of you, the one who learned to stay small, was doing the best they could. But you are not that child anymore. You can now meet the shadow with the one thing it never received: understanding. When we bring awareness to the protective function of the shadow, something softens. We no longer blame ourselves for our fear or shame. We see those responses for what they are: intelligent adaptations. The voice that says, "You're not good enough," is not cruel, it is cautious. It remembers what it felt like to be dismissed, ridiculed, abandoned. And so it overcompensates. It demands perfection. It scans for danger. It overreacts to rejection. But it is not doing this to sabotage you. It is doing it to protect you from a pain you once couldn't hold. The real tragedy is not that we feel inadequate. The tragedy is that we believe it. Jung would urge us to step back, not to argue with the shadow, but to observe it. To say, I see you. I hear what you're trying to protect. And I thank you. In doing so, we disarm it. We invite it into relationship instead of repression. And from this relationship, healing begins. So let's pause here, not to fix anything, but to feel. Ask yourself, what do I still believe I must hide to be loved? What part of me do I think will cause others to leave or laugh or shame me? That is the shadow speaking. But more importantly, that is the part of you that is waiting to come home. When we meet our shadow with compassion, we do something revolutionary. We end the war within. We stop pathologizing our pain and begin honoring it. And in that moment, the voice that once said, "You are not enough," begins to shift. It may still speak, but now it speaks as a memory, not a prophecy. As a whisper, not a wound. Carl Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. In this, he reveals the core of true transformation, not escaping the shadow, not defeating it, but welcoming it, understanding that the darkness within us is not opposed to our light, but essential to it. And so, as we move forward into the next part of this journey, remember this: the feeling of inadequacy is not your enemy. It is the guardian at the gate. And beyond that gate is the part of you that was never broken, only buried. Let's go find them. There's a moment fleeting but powerful that arises when your heart drops after being left on red. When a friend's casual comment feels like a subtle dig. When you walk into a room and suddenly question your worth. That moment isn't meaningless. It's a message. And if you listen closely, you'll hear your shadow whispering, "This is where I live." Carl Jung taught that the unconscious communicates not in rational language, but through symbols, projections, and emotional reactions. And few things are more symbolic and more revealing than our emotional triggers. These moments, which seem small on the surface, are keys. They are psychic fingerprints left by the parts of ourselves we have not yet met. What angers us, wounds us, or makes us feel invisible, these are not random. They are the shadow's flare in the night. You may think I'm just sensitive or I'm overreacting. But Jung would ask, what in you is reacting? And why does it hurt here now, this deeply? When we are triggered, we are not merely responding to the present. We are encountering the past. We are touching a nerve tied to something older, often buried in childhood or early life experiences. The pain isn't just about being ignored or misunderstood today, it's about being unseen then. A wound that was never acknowledged, let alone healed. And the shadow stores every one of those moments, carrying them like folded letters, waiting to be read. In Jungian psychology, this is not a flaw. It's an invitation. The psyche isn't trying to torment you with replays of old pain, it's trying to liberate you through awareness. Every emotional spike is the unconscious asking to be made conscious. The shadow does not scream because it is cruel. It screams because it has been unheard for too long. So what do we do with these moments? We don't avoid them. We approach them. This is where the real work begins, not in the abstract, but in the lived reality of daily life. When you feel the sting of rejection, instead of distracting yourself, pause. Ask yourself, what part of me is hurting right now? What memory does this feeling belong to? How old do I feel in this moment? These questions are not rhetorical. They are tools of transformation. Jung believed that integration comes not through suppression, but through dialogue. And when we begin speaking with our pain, not to change it, but to understand it, we step into a deeper form of self-recognition. Picture this. You feel unseen after sharing something vulnerable. The instinct is to withdraw, maybe even criticize yourself for being too much. But what if instead you sat with that part of yourself, the one who wanted to be seen? What if you treated it not as a liability, but as a lost child needing presence? That moment of tenderness is shadow work. It's the beginning of wholeness. Here's what makes this journey so difficult and so necessary. The shadow doesn't ask for performance. It asks for presence. And in a culture obsessed with fixing, optimizing, and moving on, presence can feel radical. But that's where healing lives. To sit with what you usually suppress is to reclaim your inner ground. And there's something else, something even more profound. The shadow doesn't just contain our wounds, it contains our gifts. The parts of you that were shamed for being too sensitive are often the source of your deepest empathy. The boldness you were told to quiet may be your key to leadership. The creativity you buried to fit in might be the exact medicine you were born to offer. So when you face your triggers, you are not just unearthing pain, you are uncovering potential. The same mechanisms that protect your pain also guard your brilliance. And until you reclaim them, you remain a fragment of who you truly are. Jung often said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But that terror is the threshold of transformation. It is not the pain that destroys us, it is our resistance to it. When we allow ourselves to feel fully, to sit with what is raw and real, something alchemical happens. The inner critic becomes a teacher, the trigger becomes a compass, and the shame becomes sacred. So next time you're triggered, don't turn away, don't numb, don't distract. Turn inward. Breathe. Listen, that's not weakness, it's wisdom. And as we continue deeper into this journey, remember the goal isn't to become immune to pain. The goal is to become intimate with your truth, not because it's comfortable, but because it's real. And reality, not performance, is where the soul begins to awaken. Imagine standing in front of a mirror, not to judge, not to critique, but simply to witness the person who's looking back. No filters, no mask, no performance, just you. For many, that is one of the most difficult things to do, not because they lack courage, but because they've spent a lifetime believing that what they are is not enough. Carl Jung believed that healing does not come from fixing ourselves, but from reuniting with ourselves. Integration. The sacred process of acknowledging, embracing, and including the disowned parts of our psyche is how we become whole again. Not better, not more successful, but whole. And in that wholeness, we find peace, not the absence of conflict, but the end of inner division. You see, every part of you that you've pushed away, every too sensitive, too loud, too emotional trait you were taught to hide, still lives within you. And they don't need to be erased. They need to be invited home. Because in the Jungian view, the shadow is not your ruin, it is your root. The place where the deepest vitality of your being has been waiting. But how do we integrate a part of ourselves we've spent years trying to silence, not by force, not by positive affirmations alone, but by building relationship? This begins with practice, not just reflection, but action. And these actions are not grand gestures. They are small, conscious choices that tell the shadow you belong here. Let's begin with the practice of witnessing. Each time you feel inadequate, instead of rushing to suppress the discomfort, take 5 minutes to sit with it. Breathe. Ask yourself, where in my body is this feeling sitting? What age does this pain feel like? What memory lives beneath it? This process, gentle as it is, builds a bridge between your conscious self and your unconscious wounds. It says, I see you. I'm not leaving. Jung believed that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate. But through this simple act of presence, we reclaim authorship. We begin to live not from fear or old scripts, but from awareness. The second step is reframing. When the voice of the shadow says, you're failing, pause and say, I hear you. And I choose to speak to myself with compassion. This isn't denial, it's dialogue. It's choosing not to be at war with your inner world. Instead of silencing the shadow, you become its translator. And when the shadow feels heard, its volume decreases. Not because it was crushed, but because it was met. Third and most essential is reclaiming. This is where the gold of the shadow begins to shine. That creativity you buried, bring it back. The wildness you hid to seem more acceptable, let it breathe. The sensuality, the power, the tenderness, these are not liabilities. They are life force. What was once called too much may actually be your greatest contribution. And integration means not only accepting these traits, but celebrating them. Remember, wholeness does not mean that you feel good all the time. It means that you do not abandon yourself when you don't. Carl Jung often reminded us that the journey to individuation, the realization of the full self, is not a linear ascent toward light, but a spiral into depth. It includes joy, but also grief. It includes clarity, but also confusion. And yet, every time you turn toward what you once avoided, you gain another piece of yourself. And this is the paradox. The feeling of not enough dissolves not when you become more, but when you include more. You begin to realize that the parts of you tried to suppress were never flaws. They were simply truths that needed space to exist. So if you've been asking, when will I finally feel worthy? Maybe the question is not when, but how. And the answer from Jung's perspective is through integration, through seeing yourself not as a problem to be fixed, but as a story to be remembered, a self to be returned to. This return is not always easy, but it is sacred, and it is possible. And it begins now with this breath, with this awareness, with this willingness to hold what you once rejected. Because the truth is, you were never broken. You were divided. And now, you are coming back together. There comes a moment in every person's inner journey when they stop asking, what's wrong with me, and begin asking, what part of me have I forgotten? This shift is not just psychological, it is spiritual. And it marks the beginning of true healing. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And who you truly are is not someone waiting to be fixed. You are someone waiting to be remembered. The feelings of inadequacy you've carried for so long, they were never a sign of your failure. They were signals from within, echoes from the shadow calling you home." Throughout this video, we've walked into the depths. We've explored the origins of that, not enough voice met the protective purpose of the shadow and learned to read the sacred messages hidden in our emotional triggers. Most importantly, we've discovered that the shadow is not your enemy. It is your unmet self still waiting for you beneath the surface. And now you stand at a threshold. Not the kind marked by fanfare or a sudden transformation, but the quieter kind, the kind that whispers, "Begin again with all of yourself." Because this is not a journey of self-improvement. It's a journey of self-inclusion. The more you allow space for your full truth, your fears, your sensitivity, your brilliance, the more whole you become. And wholeness is not a finish line. It's a way of being. It's crying and still trusting your worth. Failing and still knowing you are lovable. Feeling pain and still believing in your potential. That is the essence of integration. That is the work of the soul. So if something in this message stirred you, if even one part of you felt seen, know this: you are not alone. You are never too much, and you were never not enough. You were simply split, and now you are reuniting with yourself. This is the return to wholeness, and it is yours to continue. Now, before you go, take a moment to ground this message. What part of you did today's video help you reconnect with? Drop it in the comments. Your story may be the mirror someone else needs to finally feel seen. And if this journey into the shadow resonated with you, if you want more content that goes beneath the surface, content that respects the soul and speaks to the real you, then subscribe to my channel. This space is here for seekers like you, for those who dare to go deeper, for those who are done pretending and ready to remember. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And most of all, thank you for choosing yourself. Subscribe. Comment. Share your truth. Let's keep unfolding together.